Welcome to the fourth panel of this four-panel session, the one before our conclusion. Originally planned was that Victoria Rios would moderate and that we would have the special rapporteur on racism. Unfortunately, the special rapporteur on racism is very far away and too far away on a time zone-wise to join us. And Victoria had a passport problem and was unable to travel. We're trying to keep the moderators in the room. So I'm going to moderate this panel, but I think that's an opportunity in the sense of, as one of the organizers, we were asked really sort of at the beginning, are you just holding a meeting or what's the point of the event? And our answer to that has always been, no, we're not just holding a meeting. We're using, the small capacity that we have and what is frequently referred to as the convening power of the United Nations in order to basically mark a step on a road that is not a short road. It is part of advocacy work and society transformational work that many of us in this room have been involved in for decades. And many of those outside this room have been involved in for decades. And it's not something that we think will end soon. So the intention of this meeting has always been to take stock and to begin to think seriously about what are the next steps. So the theme of this next 1 hour discussion is what can we do next immediately and where are we going longer term? Also around that agenda that I described at the beginning, which is to take it also beyond Europe. And you'll notice from the agenda, there are some Europeans in this one, but there are also some people from outside the European Union, from outside Europe. I want to just tell an anecdote in honor of a person before we start, and that is some of this work begins really in Eastern Europe in the immediate post-1989 context, which was, post-1989, 1989 in Eastern Europe saw a very vigorous outbreak of anti-Romani sentiment, and a number of the really committed activists that we have now came from responding to that. One of those people is called Czeniek Ruzicka. He is a Roma person from Czechia, from the Czech Republic, born in 1946 to one of the few surviving families. And in the 1990s, I think he very much found his voice around trying to get the pig farm that had been put on the site of the concentration camp at Lety Pisku removed. Lety was a World War II concentration camp for Roma, for Czech Roma. It was established in the Nazi protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, but it was entirely Czech administered. It was run by the Czech Ministry of Interior. And so in many ways, Lety undermined the dominant discourse that the Germans came, killed people, and it wasn't our fault. Because in effect, it was a Czech camp that was basically continuous from pre-World War II policies. So he gave voice to this, remove this pig farm from this site in order to honor the memory of the victims. And in 1997, the first post-independence government of the Czech Republic collapsed, and there was an interim government appointed. It's actually 1996, 1997. There was a 6-month technical caretaker government appointed. They had the first Roma policy, and they said that in our first 6 months, in this 6-month period, we will do 3 things. They were going to do a first Roma policy. I can't remember what the second one was, but the third one was they were going to remove the pig farm at Lety. So it was a committed activist government that was going to do the right thing and remove the pig farm. it took the next 25 years to remove the pig farm. The pig farm was removed earlier this year. So not only did that government fail, but all subsequent governments failed until this year. And it took the activism of that one person together with a continuously broadening circle of people to get the pig farm finally taken away, which happened this year. I make that point only to say this work depends on people. It is not short-term work. It faces massive social opposition, as I think we heard from the German example and from others. It requires dedication. But we are here because we have moved forward. The pig farm has been removed. And there are a number of other very interesting developments in our environment. So the theme for this panel is to hear from several very interesting people from inside and outside Europe, and also to begin seriously the thinking of what can we get done in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and how do we take some more steps forward in this garden that is growing. It is a growing garden. We have Julissa Mantilla from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. She's recorded a video, and I'm hoping we can technically run it. Then we have Mr. Luciano Maris Maia from the Prosecutor Office of Brazil, one of the places where things are starting and may get interesting. We have Professor Lavinia Stan, who's a professor of political science at St. Francis Xavier University in Canada. We have Georgina Labora, who is with the group Dicanabister, that is focusing on Holocaust commemoration and doing extensive work around 2nd of August and other dates. In an activist setting. And then we have our own fellow and the key organizer for this meeting, Alina Miklos from Argentina, to tell us about some of the Argentine experience. Can we run the Inter-American Commission? And then we have discussion, at which we hope to hear where can we go next.
We don't need sound.
Yeah.
We don't hear the sound.
I think you need to do something in the settings, if I'm not mistaken, having made this mistake previously.
It's actually at the computer settings.
It's
You have to allow the application to use the sound system.
Say again?
Okay, but I'm just guessing. No, usually it's in the settings, but the computer settings, you have to make allow the application, in this case, the Zoom, to access to the microphone of the computer or speaker, sorry, not microphone.
And on that note, I propose we go to the first speaker and come back to the video.
You also muted, so also allow your own microphone.
Yeah,
That's
the case.
Chat, unmute yourself.
Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos y relatora para Memoria, Verdad y Justicia, deseo iniciar con un profundo agradecimiento a las personas organizadoras de este evento que permitirá que compartamos los estándares del sistema interamericano en materia de
Simpler.
We heard it. Continue.
para identificar los retos del pasado y las posibilidades de reparación para el pueblo roma. Parto entonces estableciendo la importancia del principio de no discriminación como una norma imperativa o norma de jus cogens que debe guiar los demás estándares del sistema interamericano y del sistema universal de derechos humanos. Este principio establece el reconocimiento en igualdad de todas las personas sin discriminación de ningún tipo sea por origen, raza, religión, idioma o cualquier otra condición. En ese sentido, quiero resaltar que la Relatoría de Memoria, Verdad, Justicia ha desarrollado su labor principalmente vinculada a los procesos de conflicto armado no internacional y dictaduras, es decir, procesos de justicia transicional. Sin embargo, la Relatoría y la Comisión en Pleno ha trabajado en otros ámbitos, por ejemplo, en el tema de las reparaciones y medidas de satisfacción vinculado a los procesos de memoria. Por otro lado, en casos como el de Nicaragua, que no es un proceso de justicia transicional, la Comisión Interamericana reconoce el rol de las madres de abril que buscan justicia para sus hijos e hijas desde los disturbios del 2018. Además, en el ámbito de este reconocimiento del principio de no discriminación, la CIDH reconoce el Día de la Memoria Transgénero, llamando a los estados a que protejan la vida y la igualdad de las personas de género diverso. Esto en el marco más general de monitoreo, pero también en el ámbito de la jurisprudencia de la Comisión y la Corte Interamericana encontramos referencia a la memoria como un baluarte principal para la lucha contra la impunidad y para el reconocimiento pleno de los derechos humanos. Por un lado, la memoria es tratada como un componente esencial de la dignidad de la víctima y que debe ser considerada en las medidas de reparación integral. Pero por otro lado, tanto la Comisión como la Corte Interamericana han enfatizado la dimensión colectiva de la memoria, es decir, lo que implica como forma de reparación y garantías de no repetición para todas las sociedades. Estas dos dimensiones, la individual y la colectiva, están íntimamente conectadas en la medida que buscan dar transparencia a los hechos violatorios y sensibilizar a la sociedad como garantía de no repetición. En el caso de Guatemala, por ejemplo, en el caso sobre el asesinato de Mirna Makchan y la impunidad, la Corte entendió que la realización de un acto público de reconocimiento de la responsabilidad del Estado contribuía de manera específica para los hechos del caso y la reparación de los familiares, pero también era una garantía de no repetición. Por otro lado, en cuanto a las iniciativas de memoria regionales, el sistema interamericano ha determinado la importancia de los actos públicos de reconocimiento de responsabilidad, así como el establecimiento de sitios y lugares de memoria. Por ejemplo, en el caso de la masacre del Mozote versus El Salvador, la Corte hizo una serie de precisiones de cómo deben organizarse y realizarse estos actos de pedido de perdón con la participación específica y directa de las víctimas y sus representantes. Por otro lado, la Comisión y la Corte han motivado y han promovido el establecimiento de memoriales, monumentos o placas y la denominación de sitios públicos referidos a la dignidad de las víctimas, a la memoria y al recuerdo de estas situaciones para que no se vuelvan a repetir. También es importante señalar que la jurisprudencia de la Corte se ha referido al tema de los archivos. Los archivos, su urbanización y su respeto son esenciales para la preservación de la memoria. En este sentido, tanto la Comisión y la Corte han instado, por ejemplo, al pleno acceso a los derechos de las personas para revisar archivos militares, por ejemplo, y que sirven no solamente para el conocimiento, sino también para los procesos de judicialización. Finalmente, quisiera referirme a la resolución número 3 del año 2019 de la Comisión Interamericana sobre los principios para las políticas públicas de memoria en las Américas, que recoge todos estos elementos de la jurisprudencia interamericana y las buenas prácticas de los diferentes países para la promoción de la memoria. En este sentido, este documento tiene tres ejes principales. El primero se refiere a todas las iniciativas educativas, culturales o de otro tipo sobre la memoria. El segundo se refiere a los procesos de identificación, construcción o recuperación y gestión sostenible de estos sitios de memoria. Y finalmente, como decía anteriormente, los principios se refieren al tema de los archivos, refiriéndose tanto al acceso a la información de lo que esto significa, acceso que debe incluirse y considerarse como un derecho tanto individual de cada persona como colectivo de la sociedad. Finalmente, quería detenerme en un reto estructural de las políticas de memoria y de todos los procesos en general de verdad, justicia y reparación. Esto es la necesidad de visibilizar con un enfoque diferencial estas situaciones y medidas. Así, por ejemplo, tenemos algunas buenas prácticas que quiero resaltar. En una reciente visita a Argentina que tuve el honor de liderar, tuvimos ocasión de acudir a la ESMA, la Escuela Superior de la Mecánica Armada, donde se dieron grandes situaciones y violaciones de derechos humanos como torturas y desaparición forzadas. Sin embargo, en la actualidad, la ex ESMA es un sitio de memoria y tienen la posibilidad enorme de recuperar esta memoria diferenciada, por ejemplo, con las muestras Ser Mujeres en la ESMA, edición 1 y 2, donde se reconstruye el informe del Nunca Más, es decir, el informe de la Comisión de la Verdad, incluyendo de manera específica lo que sucedió con las mujeres. Por otro lado, en Montevideo se ha aprobado recientemente la construcción de un memorial dedicado a las expresas políticas de la dictadura. Creo que es importante estas iniciativas y aquí me uno, mejor dicho, al informe del relator Fabián Savioli que hace unos años realizó sobre género y justicia transicional, que tuvo la virtud de recoger buenas prácticas, iniciativas regionales, mundiales en general, sobre esta visibilización diferenciada. Hablar de memoria no es solamente un derecho, como decía, individual, sino también un derecho colectivo y una responsabilidad de los estados. Porque si no sabemos lo que ocurrió, corremos un riesgo enorme de repetir estos hechos. Muchas gracias.
Oops. Just for clarity, I mean, we invited the Inter-American Commission to join, but the Inter-American Commission is the Pan-American human rights entity, and it runs the also the court, the Inter-American Court on Human Rights. By analogy, the Council of Europe, as the home of the European Court of Human Rights, has been very important as a driver for advancing things in Europe, and our thinking is it would be interesting to try to draw them in. I don't think the Inter-American Commission has yet addressed anything related to Roma issues really explicitly, but the potential is there for them to act as a mover in these issues. So we are hoping that maybe there may be a possibility for follow-up and thinking of how we might engage them further. Our next speaker is Mr. Luciano Maris Maia from the Prosecutor's Office in Brazil. He's online but live, and welcome. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, let me clarify. When we say in Brazil prosecution service, we also say that according to the Constitution, this institution has the duty to defend and promote human rights. For that reason, to defend the indigenous people's rights, the Black community Quilombola rights, and also the Roma Ciganos rights. It's not only the question of the criminal issue of prosecution, but also the active role on defending human rights. Today we deal with the action of memory and the memory of action. The action of memory reconstructs the itinerary, retraces the route, revives characters, revisits places, reveals images, rescues references and beacons. The memory of action helps to understand cultural boundaries, the construction of identities and their differences. It makes landmarks and beacons shine, signals paths. It helps to find directions. First, the Roma Ciganos came to Brazil allegedly deported from Portugal. A general suspicions against outsiders or foreigners accompanied Roma Ciganos peoples, as they were considered as not pertaining to the settled community, rather always on the road. With population growth, so prejudice against Roma Ciganos scaled. Brazil had, in the 1940s, a population of 40 million inhabitants 80 years ago. 80% of its population residing in rural areas and only 20% in urban settlements. 80 years later, by now, our population is around 215 million inhabitants, and 80% of which reside in urban areas, with a strong pressure on Roma communities because of the lack of places where to station their caravans, where to reside, having access to natural resources to have their daily life activities. In Brazil, unlike indigenous peoples and quilombolas, Black rural communities, There is no state agency to deal with Roma Ciganos issues. They remain unseen and unnoticed by policymakers. As Brazilians in general, Roman community members have constitutional rights to housing, to education, to health, to participation in political affairs, right to vote, all these rights having to be implemented in a culturally adequate manner. Nevertheless, there are no federal guidelines to help states and municipalities to comply with their constitutional duties. Being a federal state, Brazil has the government of the union, the federal government, the government of 26 member states plus the federal district, which is 27, and the government of 5,568 municipalities, all of which bearing duties to design and implement public policies concerning Roma Ciganos communities. Prejudice against the Roma Ciganos communities and members is very strong in Brazil. The absence of public policy that address Roma Ciganos needs in housing, education, health, labor dimensions jeopardize not only their way of living, but their very lives. The structural and institutional racism against Roma Ciganos is present in a daily basis. It affects the cultural approach to marriage and young women pregnancy and the way they raise their children. Living at the outskirts of cities and towns, many Roman Ciganos communities face unhealthy environments, settled in an unauthorized camping sites. Such unofficial dwelling places lack recognition of the municipalities. They are not attributed a zip code, for instance, and this letter is a legal requirement to get access to social programs. Without a zip code, without an address that you have a zip code to prove where you are, you cannot enroll for social programs in Brazil. They face difficulties to get their birth certificates. As far as moving from a place to another, they often are far from the place of birth. The lack of documentation gives room to a series of violations of their rights. They face intolerance and abuse when using public spaces for their cultural performances or to sell their goods. One must also refer to police harassment and even persecution and abuse. Roman communities living in tents or barracks are very often subject to police raids at any time of the day or the night against the Constitution, without warrant or even a grounded suspicion. The memory of the killing by the military police in the state of Bahia of 8 members of the Silva Matos family of Romani community in the city of Vitória da Conquista, Bahia, in July 2021, is still bleeding and illustrates the difficulty to have prompt, independent, impartial, and thorough investigation that may restore truth and bring reparation as a means to guarantee prevention and non-repetition. In 2001, Brazil submitted its first report to the Committee on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. In its list of issues, the committee refers to a document submitted to the committee by Brazil's civil society. I took part in the process of writing this document, and I went to Geneva to handle this document to the committee. The civil society and Congress entitled the Civil Society Report on Brazil's Observance of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which indicates that aside from Indians, the state party does not distinguish other minorities among its populations, such as Gypsies, I read the document, Gypsies and the Quilombos, and requires information and demographic details about them to be provided. The World Conference Against Racism 2001 in Durban brought momentum to discuss racism in Brazil, affirmative actions and inclusive social policies, and to put Roma Ciganos issues in the agenda. Despite raising awareness on Roma Ciganos issues for the last 20 years, not much has been done. Brazil has already faced the 3 cycles of the UPR, and it's going to be submitted to the 4th one next November. 448 recommendations were addressed to Brazil. None of them dealt with Roma Ciganos issues, none of them. One could start recommending Brazil to know how many are the Roman Ciganos community members. Until now, there is no data concerning Roma Ciganos population in Brazil. The population census due in 2020 has been delayed and is currently being carried out. Despite recommendations made by the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights and by the Federal Public Ministry, the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics refused to include questions on ethnicity on the census. Brazilians are asked to self-identify as white, yellow, brown, black, or indigenous. Roma Ciganos, as such, won't be counted. A final remark must be shared as a promise for a better future. Roma Ciganos organizations succeeded on having the Senate approving a bill, now pending appreciation by the Chamber of Deputies, on the Romani People's Statute, a parliamentary proposal which recognizes to the Roma Ciganos communities culturally adequate rights to education, to housing, to professional training and capacity building, to affirmative action, to demographic data gathering. Although the bill is still pending final approval, its content is already being part of the demands of the Roma Ciganos leaders to local governments in anticipation what is certain to occur. Dark is still the memory of the present, but with a glimpse of light in the future. The Roma Ciganos communities themselves are making their own way on the footprints of their pains and the palm reading of their gates. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I let you entirely off the speaker list, I'm wondering if you might, I mean, I don't want to put you too much on the spot, but maybe you can reflect on what the prosecutor's office might do in order to advance this agenda somewhat, or if there's some move that you might have to begin to advance things in Brazil. Would you have thoughts on that?
Yes. In all this process, the Federal Public Ministry is being party in it. We started an inquiry on violation of Gypsies, Roman Ciganos' rights 30 years ago, and we started with anthropological research, and Franz Monen, the anthropologist, launched a project gathering social workers, anthropologists, historians, sociologists, and now Aline Miklos, for instance, is part of a huge group of more than 100 researchers in Brazil dealing with Roman Ciganos studies in Brazil. And also Elisa Costa, who also spoke here as a part of NGO. So the Federal Public Ministry that fosters these dialogues, fosters the scientific investigation, and also promotes dialogue in all federal states so that they can put in the agenda these issues. We also established the dialogue with international institutions, for instance, the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the special rapporteurs when they visit Brazil, and working very closely to the Federal Ministry of Human Rights, which has a very broad name, including Ministry of the Woman, Human Rights and Equality, but has done very little concerning the Roma Ciganos community. We also work on the issue of facing discrimination and racism in the system, when we try to have a dialogue with local prosecutors so they can realize structural and institutional racism faced by the system. For instance, the issue of assuming that Roma Ciganos communities are always vagrants, itinerants. They do not allow them to defend themselves in criminal cases without going to prison or to jail as a preventive detention. So there are a lot of issues that the Federal Prosecution Service or the Federal Public Ministry is involved in, including the discussion of the statute of pending appreciation in the Congress. We helped the Senate to make the final approach of the legislation. We also helped to get all leaders, almost 100 Roman Ciganos leaders in the country to discuss each article of the proposal, so they could approach the Senate in a very prior and informed process of deliberation. It's still not the consultation process of the International Labour Organization 169, because we were in the pandemic, so we could not put people together. But this is the new phase that we're going to help them start, which is when spending the Chamber of Deputies, we're going to rally with the Roman Gypsies leaders and make them appropriate of the content and have this rights-based approach when demanding their rights before the local governments.
Super. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. And I hope you'll be able to stay on the line for the questions once we go to the question and discussion.
I'll be here.
Great. Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Lavinia Stan, Professor of Political Science in Nova Scotia in Canada at St. Francis Xavier University, specialist in transitional justice.
Thank you very much. I'm the co-editor of the Encyclopedia of Transitional Justice, which is seen as the reference tool in the field. But I've done work on transitional justice for over 20 years, mostly in Central and Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union, but also I've advised various international bodies or national governments when it comes to the Arab Spring. So transitional justice after the Arab Spring, transitional justice after Saddam Hussein, and transitional justice in the case that we can get rid of in North Korea. I'm a kind of I'll provide very broad explanation of how we see transitional justice based on these cases, on the information we have up to now in the world. Yeah, we are making a very sharp distinction between judicial and non-judicial efforts. Judicial efforts involve the courts, non-judicial efforts do not. We also make a distinction between transitional justice methods or mechanisms that involve the state, that involve the civil society, or that involve both. And when it comes to the state, you can have national governments, local governments, international organizations or supranational bodies like the European Union. And it is important to consider all these things. So we've heard quite a lot about memorialization. That's seen mostly as a symbolic way of dealing with the past. It's very good. It's a very good initiative. It can be initiated by the civil society, sometimes with some financial support from the state, but it is seen as a complement to other types of transitional justice mechanisms. such as court trials. And we have here some examples, yeah, court trials against the former perpetrators, for example, people who masterminded the sterilization process, yeah, or the Holocaust, or, mass human rights violations that have affected the Roma. We are talking also about compensation packages like the ones that were adopted in Latin America. We are talking about official apologies delivered by governments, presidents, prime ministers, but also in some countries by various ministers. Yeah, we are talking about vetting processes, screening processes, which might not necessarily relate to Roma issues, but you can have a small vetting process of your police, secret police and armed forces involved in, in sterilization and such. Reforms of the police, of the repressive agencies of the state are also very important. They have been important in some countries more than in others, but they are seen as significant to eliminate or at least reduce profiling discrimination at these levels. Truth commissions are probably have become the standard in transitional justice these days. There is a difference between truth commissions involving victims and history commissions. I would argue that what Germany had and many other Eastern European countries, yeah, they did not have truth commissions with hearings involving victims and victimizers, but they had history commissions which produced very nice history books, which might have affected the way the general population and the government officials are seeing the past, but not necessarily most of the time. Rewriting history textbooks is also very important, and we've seen some discussion about this, some initiatives. Sometimes it's important what you put in history textbooks, how much of it you put, what kind of names in the past, what kind of incidents in the past are mentioned. Now, when it comes to civil society, so if you have examples of countries, situations where the state is reluctant to get into action, civil society can do stuff. It's a complement usually to what the state is doing. You cannot preempt state action by civil society action, but it's a sign of moving things along. Yeah. So, for example, citizens' opinion tribunals have been sometimes very important. I would say here the comfort women. Before the citizens' opinion tribunal related to that issue, nobody knew what a comfort woman is, and afterwards it raised awareness. Raising awareness is what citizens' opinion tribunals do. They are mock trials. They do not have legal processes underlying their activity, but they are educating the public. Yeah, unofficial truth projects, and I would say here there is such a broad scope of oral history projects, collecting all these testimonials. It's important, as we heard, in all countries to not have these voices silenced forever. Yeah, but memorialization cuts across various dimensions. Yeah, it can be art projects, it can be books of memory, as Memorial Society did in Russia and the former Soviet Union in the face of very reluctant governments, naming streets and localities, exhibitions, museums, official commemorations, recognition of national days. Yeah, some of these transitional justice mechanisms are more effective than others. Some of them satisfy some victims, but not others. So this is why when you design a transitional justice agenda, you have to set goals, priorities. Among truth, justice, and reconciliation, what is the most important? Among victims, what kind of victims groups you want to satisfy? Among methods, what is feasible? Sometimes, you don't have money or you don't have the victims and victimizers around, so then you cannot have court trials. I would say that no single transitional justice mechanism can satisfy all. So I would always recommend a combination of methods, a combination of government actors, a combination of civil society actors. Research is key to all these transitional justice programs, not only for truth. You cannot have justice without some kind of research, knowing where the bodies, at least of the victims are, You cannot have reconciliation unless you have some research behind it, And Roma involvement is key at all stages. Yeah, it's not for transitional justice scholars to say this has worked in this setting, because it might not work for you. It might not work in your particular situation for your particular community in a particular country.
Super. Thank you very much. Yes, we had the good fortune and planning to go to the August 2nd memorial in Auschwitz just before the pandemic. And for that reason, I'm aware that the group Dikenabistar, which is really involved deeply in the planning of that and bringing Roma activists and Roma youth to the ceremony has really done some remarkable grassroots mobilization in the past few years. Georgina Laboda is with us and will talk about their work. Over to you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here and for the organizer of this great event. I feel honored to represent today at this conference in Romanesque called Dikenabistar, and in English, Look and Don't Forget, the Roma Genocide Remembrance Initiative. As I said, my name is Georgina Laboda, and I am a Roma activist from Hungary. Currently, I am working for the Budapest-based Romedia Foundation, and I am board member of Pinana Mensa International Network. And this year, first time, I became a facilitator in the educational process at Dikenabistar. The marching extreme rights groups on our street and the lack of support to step up against extremism create fear in the Roma and in other minority groups in the 20th century too. I still have vivid memories of the fear of the Hungarian Roma communities in 2008 and 2009 when the serial killing of the Roma community happened. Every Hungarian Roma family were threatened they might become the next. The hatred against us was fueled by an extreme right political party in Hungary. One of the paramilitary organizations marched again to demonstrate their power in Hungary, again supported by an extreme right party from the parliament. Instead of society and political leadership publicly and widely denouncing such and similar openly racist marches, currently the paramilitary groups do not have to face legal consequences. And yet again, the Roma remain in fear and without support. As one of the facilitators of the Dikenabistar, I experienced the participants' lack of familiarity with the history of our community. Many historical events that we could be proud of have been already forgotten by the world. The one-week-long Dikenabistar event gives the participants the opportunity to get to know the most important international events in our community in the 21st century and in the beginning of the 21st century. For example, we are talking about the national programs against Romani communities and also events like I mentioned before. This year was particularly important for us to talk about the Ukrainian Roma community's difficulties in war times. We are grateful for Natalia Tomenko to be with us in this summer on the Cannabis Star and gave a touching speech at the 2nd of August commemoration in Auschwitz-Birkenau. We are talking about the first World Romani Congress and the effect of the Romani movement in the 70s, or about the hunger strike by Roma civil rights activists and Holocaust survivors in 1980 in the former concentration camp in Dachau. And how it started the wave of recognition of the Roma genocide until the European Parliament admitted the Roma genocide officially in 2015. We not only learn about the history of Holocaust, but also about the last 70 years of our community struggle for recognition, for justice and equality. What will happen with our history and culture of remembrance when there are no survivors of these dark chapters? The Cannabis Star aims to raising awareness among young European civil society and decision makers about the Roma genocide. Over the last few years, thousands of Romani people across Europe mobilized to organize and attend commemoration ceremonies to advocate for recognition and to educate others. When students in formal school system learn about the Holocaust is not enough to mention the Roma communities in footnotes, in parentheses. We are getting distant in time from this dark chapter of Europe's history, and objectifying the topic and only listing the persecuted groups or discussing anonymously their suffering has no result for the thinking of the youth. We have to change the discussion and stop talking about the Roma genocide from the persecutor perspective. We need more written facts about our history by professional scholars and academics. And this has to be widely accessible to everyone. We need institutions, structures, and archives to research and explore our history and culture. And we also need mainstream institutions to open up for our scholars, arts, films, and literature, so the works of the Roma are also included in the mainstream canonization. The Cannabis Star is not only about remembrance and learning about the past, but it's also about strengthening our movement for the fight against anti-Gypsyism today. As the Alliance Against Anti-Gypsyism states in their document, anti-Gypsyism is not a minority issue, but it is present in the daily life of the Roma communities. The Roma communities across Europe have to strengthen their identity because that would also help us to combat anti-Gypsyism. For this, we have to be aware of our own history and culture. Difficult to build a positive identity when we only talk about the victim position and when facing all the legacy of centuries of anti-Gypsyism, which can also be internalized. Therefore, not only learn about the sorrow past, but also looking into the strategies for survival and resistance is important. We are exposed to hate speech online and offline. Widespread fake news in creating conflicts between Roma and non-Roma communities, and it further poisons our society. From the beginning, the Cannabis Star empower young people to articulate a critical understanding of society and injustice among young Roma and non-Roma. Slowly, a generation of Roma activists became motivated by the initiative, the Cannabis Star, and stood up against anti-Gypsyism at local, national, and international levels. We are aware that anti-Gypsyism is one of the root causes of social exclusion and marginalization of the Roma community. However, Romani people are inspired to present a counter-narrative to the society. For this, we need to access to tools and support to achieve change, support to organize more and more non-formal education trainings and for Roma and non-Roma youth to succeed. And what about the future? To shape the future, we need to strengthen a community-wide mobilization and participation in remembrance activities, especially of young people. And decision makers have to see improving the young Romani people opportunity to access meaningful participation also important in the society. Therefore, we have to advance the access to the participation of the young Roma on every level. They have to be able to get involved in the operation of the society, engage in political participation, and be represented in decision-making. The testimonies and stories of resistance became one of the most important part of the Cannabis Star. We need to create space and make them visible. This conference and the transitional justice approach also show us how important it is to give visibility and recognition to the testimonies and voices of the victims of the dark chapters and people affected of anti-Gypsyism. Need to invest in more educational programs and strengthen the work of Roma youth organizations, training youth more as educators and to become strong voices in social debates about history and remembrance. Thank you.
Great. We have one more presentation in this panel. It is from our senior minority fellow in Argentina, Alina Miklos, who, as noted, has been a very driving force behind the organization of this meeting, and with whom we will be working together with partners on the follow-up. Alina, you have the floor, and you're speaking in Spanish? Okay.
Sí. I prepared in English just a little. I prepared my presentation in English about Romani rights in Argentina. But I will change my presentation because I think that it's important here to speak about the difference between Latin America and Europe. For example, here some participation speak about the ILO Convention 169 and how is important for us. I know that in Europe it's different. We have other kind of issues. And sorry, I forgot my my notes there. I need to be careful with the cables. And my, okay, thank you. It's okay. And we have other difference too. So I would like to speak about this. And now I will speak in Spanish and someone will translate it.
We'll have consecutive, that means through the so you'll have to stop and let them translate.
Okay, thank you. Cuando empezamos la organización del evento, una de las cosas principales cuando Claude me invitó era también salir un poco de Europa, porque nosotros los romaníes no somos solo una minoría europea, pero somos una minoría mundial y estamos muy presentes en Latinoamérica. Y me gustó mucho escuchar también la presentación, por ejemplo, de Kamel, que habló sobre la situación en Turquía, que para mí fue algo muy nuevo. Sabemos que somos muchos en Turquía, pero no tenemos muchas noticias. Y entonces, de la misma manera que somos una minoría mundial, el prejuicio también es mundial. Entonces, cuando yo hablo de prejuicio en Europa y cómo es el prejuicio en Latinoamérica, la primera pregunta que me hacen en lugares como más abiertos es: ¿cómo puede ser que los gitanos sean discriminados en todo el mundo? Como si la culpa es de nosotros por ser discriminados. O si el mundo entero está correcto, si es un caso mundial, ¿entendés? Entonces el problema es nuestro. que el racismo y en el hecho de que algunas personas creen que son mejores que las otras. O sea, la culpa siempre está en el discriminado y no en el discriminador. Y les quería decir que las leyes y decretos contra los gitanos en Latinoamérica llegó junto con nosotros en los barcos. En Portugal llegamos en principios de la colonización, pero en la América Española empezamos a llegar sobre todo en fines del siglo XIX. Bueno, hablé sobre las similitudes, sobre el racismo que pasa y ahora voy a hablar sobre las diferencias que están en la perspectiva, cuando preguntamos qué hacemos en el futuro, ¿no? Y entonces las diferencias entre algunas políticas y algunas concepciones en Latinoamérica y en Europa. Primero, Elisa Costa, la Roma brasilera que participó, ella habló sobre la Convención 169 de la OIT y de la importancia de que nosotros estemos en la Convención 169. Y después Dalila también habló sobre esto y Luciano Maris también habló sobre esto. La Convención 169 es la Convención de Pueblos Indígenas y Tribales y para nosotros es muy importante que nosotros los romaníes seamos considerados en esta convención. Es muy raro entender, por ejemplo, los romaníes como pueblos tribales, pero gracias a esta Convención 169 nosotros podemos luchar por nuestros derechos en Latinoamérica junto con los indígenas y los afrodescendientes. Esa es la primera diferencia, porque sé, por ejemplo, que en Francia ellos no ratificaron la Convención 169 y la cuestión de minorías allá es muy diferente de la realidad en Latinoamérica y no estoy segura, pero España tampoco ratificó la Convención 169, pero yo no estoy segura sobre eso. Sí, esa es la primera diferencia. La segunda diferencia es que para nosotros en Latinoamérica, y creo que en España también, la comunidad para ellos no es un insulto decir nosotros somos gitanos o nosotros somos ciganos. Incluso cuando estamos trabajando con la comunidad y decimos que todos somos home, muchos van a decir, no, perdón, yo no soy home, yo soy cigano, yo soy gitano, yo soy calé o yo soy ludar. Entonces, por eso en muchos documentos nosotros utilizamos la palabra gitano, cigano, después romaní o home. Y esto es justificado porque todo lo que fue discutido en el primer Congreso Internacional del Pueblo Romaní en 1971 en Londres, estas ideas llegaron en Latinoamérica solamente en los años 90 gracias a los activistas, pero se quedó solo con los activistas romaníes. O sea, no son ideas que son reconocidas y muy conocidas en toda Latinoamérica. Por ejemplo, en Argentina, algunas asociaciones tienen trabajos en las escuelas con alumnos romaníes y uno de los trabajos, por ejemplo, es presentarles la bandera romaní y el himno romaní. Yo fui a muchas escuelas a cantar el himno y a enseñarles porque es algo muy nuevo en Latinoamérica. Ok, otra diferencia es sobre la discriminación positiva. Yo no sé cómo es en Europa, pero en Brasil nosotros utilizamos mucho la discriminación positiva para construir políticas públicas para pueblos romaníes. Por ejemplo, en las universidades en Brasil, nosotros en algunas universidades tenemos cupos para personas romaníes. Sí. Otra diferencia grande, no sé si tan grande, pero otra diferencia fue lo que yo estaba hablando con Miriam Caroli durante el intervalo, que tiene que ver con la masacre de las familias gitanas en Latinoamérica. Ella me preguntó qué esto significaba y entonces yo le dije que en Latinoamérica nosotros no tuvimos una masacre concentrada como fue el Holocausto, estoy diciendo como mucha masacre en poco tiempo, pero tuvimos diversos tipos de ataques a las comunidades romaníes en distintos momentos. Como dije antes, las leyes antigitanas en Brasil y en Latinoamérica, y no solo las leyes, pero decretos llegaron junto con el pueblo romaní. Y entonces durante toda la historia, y nosotros sabemos por las familias, hubo muchas masacres. Por ejemplo, el año pasado la policía en Brasil mató a 11 hermanos de la misma familia y es muy difícil intervenir en estos casos porque las víctimas no van a la policía para hacer denuncias justamente porque ellas tienen miedo. La última diferencia, que no sé exactamente cómo es en toda Europa, pero en Brasil cuando estamos hablando de pueblos romaníes, estamos hablando de una gran parte que no tiene documentos de identidad. Y entonces el acceso a la salud, a la educación, etcétera, etcétera, pasa por no tienen acceso, pero tampoco tienen documento de identidad. Y eso es lo primero que tenemos que hacer allá. Y para concluir, porque estamos en la mesa del futuro, ¿no? Y ahora, ¿qué vamos a hacer? Con este congreso también, gracias a Claude y toda la organización del congreso, esta abertura que estamos teniendo para las Américas justamente tiene que ver con esto. Cuando invitamos a la presidenta de la Comisión Interamericana, la idea es justamente empezar un diálogo con la Comisión Interamericana. Tanto en Argentina, para mí el país que está más avanzado con políticas públicas para pueblos gitanos en Latinoamérica es Colombia. Pero en Brasil y en Argentina nosotros tenemos algunas leyes que todavía están en votación y para mí lo más importante es que demos incentivo para que esas leyes sean aprobadas lo más rápido posible. Y por fin, algo que fue muy importante fue el encuentro Roma de Américas, que fue el primero en 2015, el segundo en 2007, organizado por la Relatoría Especial de Minorías. Y en este encuentro se hizo informes y se hizo recomendaciones y nosotros creemos que los estados tendrían que implantar inmediatamente a estas recomendaciones. Bueno, muchas gracias. No fue lo que había planeado decir, pero creo que es importante hablar sobre estos temas para agregar más informaciones al Congreso. Gracias.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. We're running against time. So what I want to do is just open the floor briefly to 2-3 interventions. I see hands. I invite questions to the panel as well as proposals for the future. So I see 4 hands, Soraya, then Ismail, then Miriam, and then Damian. And I think that's all we have time for. But I will look, I will also look into the internet and see if there's anybody. Soraya.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to make it clear for me, are Roma seen as a tribe in Latin America? No? So why is 169 that important? Because I couldn't follow, because I know it is for indigenous people and tribes. So if it is a benefit for Roma, how are they seen as? Okay. And then I have another comment, just, can I say it?
Keep going, yeah.
Okay. I would just ask all of you, at least in this room, when we speak about Roma Holocaust, can we not just use Holocaust and not genocide? If you say Roma genocide, I don't know where, I don't know by whom, I don't know the time. If you say Holocaust, I would say Nazi Germany. I would say 30 to 45. I would say Germany and Europe. So please, this is a request, no, not request. Question, yeah. I would empower you, not empower, and encourage you to use Holocaust and let others use genocide, because for me, it is a way of antithesis, how you use the words and how you making smaller things. Yeah? Okay, thank you.
I suggest that we take the 4 and then I come back to the panel. So just hold your responses, Ismail.
Yeah, my first question is for Lavinia. It's about how to ensure a state responsibility, because you mentioned something is that we risk that a state put responsibility in civil society. So there is some danger when we put a lot of responsibility on civil society engagement. How to ensure that? Because you talk about official truth and I would say state truth. So how to guarantee that? You mentioned very well in the previous session, when you have a court trial, somehow it is always there. But if you don't have a court trial, like it would be most probably in the case of this commission in Spain, in Germany, and many others, where the victims are not anymore alive. So how to ensure that state truth, official truth. Then about the role of civil society is very dangerous. I was talking with Andrzej Mirga in Poland about how trustable is civil society when we talk about dealing not with people, not with alive victims, but with archives. And when you have to deal with archives, that I think it will be one of the challenges you will face, we not always have the answer. So this issue about lost in translation, when we compare different truth commissions, we have to really take care about. And yeah, of these two issues, civil society and how to ensure a state responsibility. About Spain, Spain did ratify all the, including the Convention 169 in 2007, and all the international conventions, covenants, and so on and so forth. But does not apply. Does not apply because the recognition of minorities in Spain does not exist by constitution. Then in practice, it's much more complex. But the problem, ratified, not applied, and how to ensure law enforcement by international institutions, not to put the responsibility on civil society when we talk about accountability, but how international institutions keep accountable national states.
That's a short question. We can give also writing recommendations.
Yes, please.
Okay, because I had prepared some for the morning session.
That would be
I see
great.
someone who would like to do this, to send it to you. And there was also one which I want to mention because Soraya made this point about Holocaust versus genocide. I think also what we need is space and the opportunity to discuss about terminology. My feeling is that there's a lot of confusion around, a lot of unclarity also of the different meaning. It's very emotional, but I think we need space to discuss it among ourselves and then come forward with something. Anyway, this is just, it came to me, I think it's very important. I had a question to, I first of all, thank to all this great panel. I think it was very illuminating also for me, seeing these different strands and also the situation. I think it was very enlightening. I have a question also from what I heard today, also because the Truth Commission is so promoted here in this room and maybe also in the online forum. But I want to ask you as an expert, since you've heard so many different situations, is Truth Commission for appropriate, for these different typologies? Or would you say there must be certain things in place in order to set up a Truth Commission? Because my feeling is there's a lot of different violations and maybe Truth Commission is not appropriate for it, but that is just a question.
Damian, so pass the microphone just slightly to the, yeah.
¿Estoy ok para ser traducido? En este caso quería aprovechar que Aline Miklos habló sobre América Latina y puntualmente sobre Sudamérica.
Interpreter, if you can just wait and we'll do it consecutive, yeah? Okay, super, thank you.
Okay. Quería aprovechar que Aline Miklos habló puntualmente de Latinoamérica y de Sudamérica en especial. En Latinoamérica hay gran parte de la población gitana mundial. Y es muy diferente las formas de discriminación y de sufrimiento que recibe el pueblo gitano romaní en Latinoamérica y puntualmente en Sudamérica, que es donde más conozco la situación. Creo que hay que avanzar en la igualdad de derechos. Puntualmente en Argentina, en los hospitales no nos atienden bien. De hecho, mi abuela hace un mes murió a causa de un mal diagnóstico médico. Continúo. De la misma forma, nos ven en cualquier oficina pública, sea comisaría para hacer una denuncia, sea un juzgado, somos juzgados previamente antes de llegar al juez y antes de que se lleve a cabo el juicio. Ya solo somos prejuzgados por ser gitanos, solo por eso. Hablando del futuro, y no quiero quedarme tanto en el presente, creo que una de las soluciones es la igualdad de derechos, el acceso a la identidad, ya que muchos carecen de identidad, de DNI, que es el documento de identidad nacional. Y creo que la discriminación es estructural y está arraigada en las raíces de la sociedad y en las raíces de los gobiernos. Los gobiernos, cuando nos ven, miran para otro lado o solo se sacan fotos porque somos coloridos o somos sujetos de atención. Y para cerrar, una posible solución es asignar algún presupuesto en derechos humanos para una especialidad en pueblo gitano, crear una agencia como la de pueblos originarios que está creada actualmente en Argentina y emplear a personas gitanas. Yo creo que empieza por ahí un poco la reconciliación con la sociedad y un poco la reparación se va a dar por ahí. Que la gente que lo sufre actualmente pueda emprender el camino de sanación y el camino para hacerlo desde adentro, con el corazón y bien hecho, como se merece nuestra causa. Gracias.
Super. Thank you very much. I have one comment online and then I'll come back to the panel from Brigitte Kairus, who says to Dr. Luciano Marismaya and Alina Miklos, anti-Gypsyism is impregnated in different social, cultural, and political instances in Brazil and Latin America. At a cultural level, it is still a challenge for us Latin Americans to build a strong Romani memory. We lack representation on patrimonial and museal exhibitions, for example. Which strategies could we build politically and culturally to better enforce memory and historical knowledge education? And with that, I turn to the panel to respond. very briefly, please. Who, maybe we start with our colleague from the Brazil Prosecutor's Office. Are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Well, thank you for the comment, Brigitte. Roma gypsies in Brazil and in several different places based very much on orality. Therefore, one has to foster the use of videos and meetings that can record their participation, their history, their present and their past. And I think that this can be, the pandemic has showed that we can do that because most of us have mobile phones that can also take this advantage, and then try to organize this information. We already have in the Federal Public Ministry what we call the, there is in our website dozens of contributions from different communities and also from Roma Ciganos communities, and we can foster that and organize that. And I count on her to design a project that you can carry on such a very incredible idea.
Super. Thank you very much. I go in order. Lavinia, Stan.
How to guarantee state responsibility? I don't know. There is such a big difference between signing as a state an international instrument and implementing it. Yeah, and in transitional justice, we are banging our heads on this implementation phase a lot. I would say that transitional justice is an instrument. You will always hope for 100% efficiency and you get 5%, and you should go home very satisfied. Yeah, and this is why I say have multiple instruments at multiple levels, like a big bang, and then you will get something out of it. Yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket, on one truth commission, on one prosecutor's office, or at the international level. Not that I'm criticizing them. There is a big difference between international transitional justice initiatives that are not owned by communities. That's the main, they might work, but they are not owned by the community. Then if you work at the community level, you satisfy this community, but not other communities. And the problem with the Roma is that you have so many violations in so many countries. So this is why I think that one truth commission is not enough. We might have like an international truth commission. These people might come up. I've been involved with the a panel of inquiry into North Korea, and it's like, you get some report, you get some action, you get some awareness at the international level, but of course the criticism will always be, it's too remote, it's there somewhere, and it's the effects are not spilling into the community, or 3 people who might be Roma, all of them, but it's like 3 Roma as opposed to so many different Roma communities being represented. There is only so much you can do with international instruments. Now, I would say, let's have a truth commission at the international level and multiple truth commissions at the national level. And actually Brazil, we came up in the second edition of the Encyclopedia of Transitional Justice with the label commissionism. Why? Because Brazil has the fever of truth commissions. I mean, these people, I think you have 100 truth commissions at all levels, South Korea is in the same situation. Sometimes you have to repeat yourself, with the same transitional justice mechanism. Am I a proponent of truth commissions? Really, no. I think they are too fashionable in a way, But again, memorialization, with truth commissions, with compensations, with UN special representatives, with citizens' opinion tribunals. If you combine these methods, yeah, you will get something, you know. And I want to make a very short remark. Transitional justice is different from transition. There is only so much that transitional justice will deliver to you when it comes to the welfare of the community. You have to have other kind of political action, yeah, to solve the health problems. And I think Canada is a good example. We had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission with respect to the Indian residential schools, although it is, and I would have to say, it is probably the final report that was embraced by the larger community, the most in the world. I mean, really, it spilled out, it really had a bang. And still, the Aboriginal communities will tell you that's not too much. That's, you know, well, my response would be, there is only so much we can do with transitional justice. Transitional justice does not preempt your other efforts when it comes to education, healthcare, inclusion. Huh?
Super, thank you very much. Let us go to Georgina. Georgina.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to return about this, what's the proper, the definition, but like that definition, like how the baby called. I just wanted to say, like, that also makes to word it, like when we are talking about Samudaripen or Poraimos, and that's what I also try to emphasize in when I was talking, like we need more written documents, more debate, discussion, and even if it's already, there is some existing already, it has to be accessible, because maybe there is somewhere it's written down, why we calling this and why they are calling that. If nobody reads it, because it's just like the small group of researchers can access for this. So let's make it accessible. Let's put it in every library in Europe and in the world.
Alina? Sobre la pregunta de Soraya Post, la cuestión es que en América Latina empezó a trabajar las cuestiones romaníes hace muy poco tiempo.
Interpreter.
En Brasil, la primera política pública fue de 2005-2006, donde el presidente reconoció el Día Nacional del Pueblo Romaní. El Día Internacional del Pueblo Romaní. En Argentina, la primera política pública para pueblos romaníes fue del año pasado. Y es una política pública muy chiquita, que es un guía de cómo los medios audiovisuales deben tratar a los pueblos romaníes. Entonces, ¿cómo estamos empezando este trabajo? Los estados de América Latina no saben cómo clasificar y dónde poner al pueblo romaní. Por ejemplo, en Argentina ellos prefieren poner al pueblo romaní junto con los migrantes y refugiados. En Brasil, ellos prefieren clasificar al pueblo romaní junto con los afrodescendientes e indígenas, por eso que en Brasil somos considerados como pueblos tribales. Y cuestión que es muy extraño, es muy bizarro, yo estoy de acuerdo con ustedes, pero gracias a la Convención 169 nosotros tenemos más derechos y también porque en Brasil tenemos un problema de territorio y de tierras correspondiente al pueblo romaní que creo que no hay en Europa y voy a explicar. Sí, vamos. Por ejemplo, en Brasil todavía tenemos campamentos de personas de familias romaníes y ellos están acampados en algunas tierras por muchos años, estoy diciendo por 50 años, por 60 años, pero el Estado no reconoce estas tierras como propiedad de los romaníes. Y entonces, gracias a la Convención 169, los pueblos romaníes pueden reivindicar estos territorios. Ok, después yo tengo algunas preguntas para Ismael, pero hablamos en el intervalo.
Thank you. Okay, just from the moderator's position, just 3 short comments on the questions. I mean, as Alina said, Afro-descendant communities have mobilized around 169 usefully. It's a choice of a community to decide how they want to mobilize. If it's useful, it can be, you know, in Latin American context, it apparently has been useful for communities that you might not think of as tribal or indigenous.
I think it's very strong and it is very good.
Yes.
We have it, we have it in Sweden too.
I just wanted to say also, since we're in Switzerland, the government of Switzerland several years ago told the Council of Europe that it was not planning to ratify ILO 169 because it was worried that it might apply to Roma and travelers, which is quite a not very legitimate reason to non-ratify, but tells you something about, you know, what the power of treaties anyway. And then on Lavinia's point on this multi-level thing, I mean, it was the European Parliament resolution that Soraya shepherded came with the vision of a European Truth Commission and national level truth commissions. And I think that was the basis of discussion that both there is a Europe-wide issue and the particular national experiences are distinct and need particular examination. And I guess it applies also in the international and potentially American situation. With that, I would close this session and move us straight to the closing. Again, we're still running against time. The agenda here is we have Jan Yajab on the line. Jan has huge experience in Europe.